Ben and Josh were playing Call of Duty when their parents came charging into the living room. Dad shouts, "You boys play that darn thing way too much. Get your butts outside and play. I don't want to see you two until tea time." He kicks the boys outside, then turns to his wife. "Alona last," he says, unbuttoning his trousers. His wife gives a wicked smile and removes her top. A few minutes later, walking down the street, Ben turns to Josh. "I can't believe we got kicked out of our own live stream." "I know," says Josh, looking at his phone, "but you should see the views we're getting." The bus driver was driving the bus when two middle-aged women are arguing over the last seat on the bus. It gets really heated and they about to come to blows. The bus driver stops the bus and tells them the seat has to go to the older of the two. They look at each other. The seat remains empty. A doctor at an insane asylum decided to take his patients to a baseball game. For weeks in advance, he coached his patients to respond to his commands. When the day of the game arrived, everything went quite well. As the national anthem started, the doctor yelled, "Up nuts!" The patients complied by standing up. After the anthem, he yelled, "Down nuts!" And they all sat back down in their seats. After a home run was hit, the doctor yelled, "Cheer nuts!" They all broke out into applause and cheered. When the umpire made a particularly bad call against the star of the home team, the doctor yelled, "Boo nuts!" And they all started booing and catcalling. Comfortable with their response, the doctor decided to go get a beer and a hot dog, leaving his assistant in charge. When he returned, there was a riot in progress. Finding his missing assistant, the doctor asked, "What in the world happened?" The assistant replied, "Well, everything was going just fine until this guy walked by and yelled, 'Peanuts!' My daughter came and asked me, 'What's gays?' I said, 'They are men who love other men.' Then she asked, 'What's penetrating gaze?' 'Oh, can you read me the whole sentence?' She said he stared at me with a penetrating gaze. A man was teaching his son how to hunt when they got lost. 'Don't worry,' said the father. 'This is a good learning opportunity. We'll just shoot in the air 3 times. That's the universal signal for help.' So he shot in the air 3 times. They waited and waited, but no one came. 'That's okay,' said the father. 'Nobody was around that time, so we'll just try again. Why don't you shoot this time?' So the son shot in the air 3 times. They waited another hour, but still no one came. 'Let's try one more time,' said the father. 'Okay, but it better work this time. These are my last arrows.' On the first day of Trevor's freshman year in college, his English professor asked the students to state their names and one interesting fact about themselves. Trevor said, 'My brother and I know the definition of every single word in the English language.' A wave of laughter rolls through the auditorium. The professor raised her hands to the students. 'Is that so?' she asked. 'Yes, ma'am. Absolute truth.' She wrote the word supercilious on the board. 'Okay, Trevor, what does this word mean?' He looked at the board for a moment and said, 'That's one that my brother knows.' A man walks into a bar and orders a drink. As he's sipping his drink, he notices a jar full of money on the counter. Curious, he asks the bartender about it. 'Bartender, that's our challenge jar. You put in $10, and if you complete 3 challenges, you win the whole jar.' The man puts in $10 and asks about the challenges. Bartender, 'All right, here are your 3 challenges. First, you have to drink a whole bottle of hot sauce without making a face. Second, there's a pit bull out back with a sore tooth. You have to remove it. Third, there's a 90-year-old woman upstairs who's never experienced pleasure. You gotta fix that.' The man thinks for a moment and then nods in agreement. He takes a deep breath, grabs the bottle of hot sauce, and downs it without flinching. Emboldened, the man heads out back to the pit bull. The bar patrons hear growling, barking, and a bit of a scuffle. After a few minutes, the man returns, slightly scratched up but triumphant. Now the entire bar is buzzing with anticipation. The man turns to the bartender and asks, 'Where's that old lady with the sore tooth?' Bloke sits down in a restaurant and the waiter comes up with the menu. 'Good evening, sir. Here's the menu.' The bloke says, 'No, I don't want a menu. Just bring me a dirty knife from service.' The waiter shrugs, goes into the kitchen, fetches a dirty knife and brings it back to the client. He sniffs it very carefully and says, 'Wow, that beef bourguignon is absolutely perfect. Just the right balance of flavor. I'll have that, please.' The waiter is astonished, but goes back to the kitchen and brings out the beef. Next day, the same bloke comes back. Same thing, the menu. But the bloke says, 'No, just bring me a dirty knife.' He sniffs it, smells it, smiles and says, 'The sole meunière is delightful. Just delightful. I'll have that, please.' So the waiter wanders off and brings him the sole. Next day, same thing. But the waiter decides to screw with the bloke. He goes into the kitchen and says to the dishwasher, 'Bubba, just rub this knife on your privates, will you?' So he does. And the waiter returns to the dining room. The bloke picks up the knife, sniffs it once, frowns at the waiter and says, 'How long has Bubba's sister been working here?' A man who owned a sausage factory was showing his arrogant schmuck son around his factory. Try as he might to impress his snobbish son, his son would just sneer and look down his nose at everything. They approached the heart of the factory, where the father thought, 'This should impress him!' He showed his son a machine and said, 'Son, this is the heart of the factory. With this machine here, we can put in a pig, and out come sausages.' The son, unimpressed, said, 'Yes, but do you have a machine where you can put in a sausage, and out comes a pig?' The father, 'Yes, son. We call it your mother.' A guy goes to a blind date and asks his friend, "What do I do when she looks so awful I don't like her from the first moment?" "Don't worry, there's an app called Hi Mom, Are You Okay? You schedule it to ring your phone. When you like the person, you just ignore it. When not, just pretend your mom is in trouble and leave the date." The guy installs the app and goes to the date. When he sees the woman, he sees she is an absolute gem. Then her phone rings. She picks up the phone and says, "Hi Mom, are you okay?" A man stumbles upon a little girl's lemonade stand and asks, "How much for a glass?" "First one's 25 cents, she responds. He hands her the money, downs the lemonade, and asks for another. "The second cup is 25 bucks, she states. Confused, the man asks, "Why?" This one has the antidote. A lively bar was buzzing with energy. A sign out front reading, "Bouncer Wanted." A man strolled in, spotting the bartender busy serving drinks. He approached the bartender with a confident grin. "Is the bouncer position still open?" he asked. "Not yet filled," the bartender replied, eyeing him curiously. "Do you have any experience?" The man shook his head. "Well, no, but watch this." With that, he strode over to an obviously drunk patron swaying near the bar.
You got a piece of color.
With a swift motion, he hoisted the patron up and threw him right out the front door. The patrons gasped, then murmured in approval. "How's that for experience?" the man boasted, puffing out his chest. The bartender raised an eyebrow, impressed but skeptical. "Not bad," he admitted, "but you'll need to talk to the boss about the job." "Sure thing," the man said confidently. "Where is he?" "Well, you just threw him out." A lady was intrigued by these alligator boots she's heard about. She went to a shoe store and asked for it but was taken aback by the sheer price. "Why the heck would this pair of shoes cost 40 times more than any regular shoes?" she exclaimed. Offended by the lady's ignorance, the storekeeper snapped at her. "If you want it cheap, go and fetch the gator yourself." "Fine, I'll do it," yelled the lady as she walked outside and slammed the door shut. After a few minutes, the shopkeeper felt bad and wanted to find the lady and apologize. He went to look for her and finally found her in a river, wrestling an alligator. On the riverside, two alligators lay dead. After a short struggle, the lady managed to defeat the third alligator and lifted its entire body out of the river. "Dang it!" she exclaimed. "This one's not wearing boots either." A not-so-bright man is talking to his friend, and the friend asks him, "How many pancakes can you eat on an empty stomach?" The man thinks and says 4. The friend says, "You can only eat 1. Confused, the man asks his friend to explain, and the friend says, "Once you eat the first one, your stomach isn't empty anymore." The man chuckles at his friend's wit. Later that day at home, the man calls his wife and says, "How many pancakes can you eat on an empty stomach?" The wife says 3. The man says, "Damn, if you'd said 4, I would have said something really funny." One sunny afternoon, my dad handed me some money and sent me to the paint store. "Get me some striped paint," he said with a straight face. Feeling dutiful, I headed to the store, imagining cans of paint with perfect stripes. After the store owner laughed for about 10 minutes straight, he sent me back home to ask my dad if he wanted horizontal stripes or vertical stripes. Dad is still rolling around on the floor, laughing. 4 men are in a hospital because their wives are having babies. A nurse goes up to the first guy and says, "Congratulations, you're a father of twins." The man says, "That's crazy, because I work for the Minnesota Twins." The nurse says to the second guy, "Congratulations, you're the father of triplets." The man says, "That's also crazy, I work for the 3M company." The nurse tells the third guy, "Congratulations, you're the father of quadruplets." The man says, "That's also crazy, I work for the Four Seasons Hotel." The last man is freaking out and banging his head against the wall. The nurse asks him, "What's wrong, trying to get a headache?" He replies, "No, I'm doomed. I work for 7-Up." 3 women are in the hospital having a baby. The brunette says, "I'm going to have a boy, as we did it in the missionary position." The redhead says, "I'm going to have a girl, as we did it in the cowgirl position." The blonde starts crying and says, "I'm going to have a puppy." A man and a woman who had never met before, but who were both married, found themselves assigned to the same sleeping cabin on a transcontinental train. Though initially embarrassed and uneasy over sharing a cabin, they went to bed, he in the upper berth and she in the lower. At 1 a.m., they were both still wide awake and they both knew it. He said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but would you be willing to reach into the closet under your bed to get me a second blanket? I'm awfully cold." "I have a better idea," she replied. She added, "Just for tonight, let's pretend that we're married." "That's a great idea," he said, now totally aroused. "Good," she replied. "Get your own blanket." A captain aboard a battleship spots a light in the distance in the battleship's path. Not wanting there to be a collision, he radios the source of the light. "Change your course 10 degrees south." The response is quick. "Change your course 10 degrees north." His pride slightly damaged, the captain responds testily, "I am an admiral, first class. Change your course 10 degrees south." The response, "I am a lieutenant, second class. Change your course 10 degrees north." Now losing his patience, the captain angrily radios, "Change your course 10 degrees south. I'm in a battleship." Comes the answer, "Change your course 10 degrees north, sir. I'm in a lighthouse." When Beethoven passed away, he was buried in a churchyard. A couple days later, the town drunk was walking through the cemetery and heard some strange noise coming from the area where Beethoven was buried. Terrified, the drunk ran and got the priest to come and listen to it. The priest bent close to the grave and heard some faint, unrecognizable music coming from the grave. Frightened, the priest ran and got the town magistrate. When the magistrate arrived, he bent his ear to the grave, listened for a moment, and said, "Ah, yes, that's Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, being played backwards." He listened a while longer and said, "There's the Eighth Symphony, and it's backwards too." Most puzzling. So the magistrate kept listening. "There's the Seventh, the Sixth, the Fifth." Suddenly the realization of what was happening dawned on the magistrate. He stood up and announced to the crowd that had gathered in the cemetery, "My fellow citizens, there's nothing to worry about. It's just Beethoven decomposing." A guy and a parrot sit down on an airplane. The guy finds it weird, but if people can bring dogs, you can also bring parrots, he thinks. Moments later comes the flight attendant. "Good evening, can I serve you anything?" The parrot says, "Bring a nice cold beer, yo." The attendant is startled by it, but well, the client is always right. She then comes back with beer. The parrot chugs it and says again, "Now I'm in the mood for some wine. Bring me a red wine, you." The man, seeing the opportunity, says, "Can you bring me a glass of water, please?" "Thank you." The attendant grabs the wine, but forgets the glass of water. She comes back, and the parrot says, "God, you're a piece of shit. I've told you already I don't like dry wine. Bring me a sweet one." And the guy says, "And bring my water, please. Just a small glass. Pretty please." Then she goes back to the bar, grabs the wine, but forgets the water again. As she walks back, the guy, annoyed, tries to use the parrot's tactic and says, "You stupid. I've told 2 times already to bring me my water." The attendant is done with it. "That's it. I won't tolerate this treatment no more." She then goes to the pilot and tells him about the parrot and the man. The pilot goes to the both of them and says, "You two are cursing everybody in this airplane? That's it. You're out." He then grabs both, opens the door, and kicks them out of the airplane. As both of them are falling, the parrot says, "Bro, for someone that doesn't have wings, you're really f***ing brave." The housemaid approached the lady of the house one sunny afternoon, a determined look on her face. "Madam, I need a raise," she declared. The lady raised an eyebrow, curious. "Oh, and what exactly do you have in mind?" The maid smiled confidently. "I'd like a Ferrari, madam." The lady's eyes widened in disbelief. "A Ferrari? Why in the 7 hells do you think you deserve that?" The maid straightened up. "Well, for starters, I cook way better than you." The lady's expression turned to one of skepticism. "Says who?" "Your husband," the maid replied with a sly smile. "And I do the laundry better than you." The lady crossed her arms. "And why do you think that?" "Your husband told me," the maid said matter-of-factly. "And, madam, I'm also much better in bed than you are." The lady's face turned red with anger. "Did my husband say that too?" The maid shook her head, barely suppressing a grin. "No, madam, the pool boy did. Red or yellow?" A driver was stuck in a traffic jam on the highway outside Washington, D.C. Nothing was moving. Suddenly, a man knocks on the window. The driver rolls down the window and asks, "What's going on?" "Terrorists have kidnapped the entire U.S. Congress, and they're asking for a $100 million ransom. Otherwise, they are going to douse them all in gasoline and set them on fire. We are going from car to car, collecting donations." "How much is everyone giving on an average?" the driver asks. The man replies, "Roughly a gallon." A lady about 8 months pregnant got on a bus. She noticed the man opposite her was smiling at her. She immediately moved to another seat. This time the smile turned into a grin, so she moved again. The man seemed more amused. When on the 4th move, the man burst out laughing. She complained to the driver, and he had the man arrested. The case came up in court. The judge asked the man, about 20 years old, what he had to say for himself. The young man replied, "Well, Your Honor, it was like this. When the lady got on the bus, I couldn't help but notice her condition. She sat down under a sign that said, 'The Double Mint Twins are coming,' and I grinned. Then she moved and sat under a sign that said, 'Logan's liniment will reduce the swelling,' and I had to smile. Then she placed herself under a deodorant sign that said, 'William's big stick did the trick,' and I could hardly contain myself. But Your Honor, when she moved the 4th time and sat under a sign that said, 'Goodyear rubber could have prevented this accident,' I just lost it. Case dismissed." I've always wanted to start a company called Thank You for Calling, How May I Help You? Then my receptionist will have to answer the phone like, "Thank you for calling, how may I help you, how may I help you?" Every day after work, 2 girls would look for their cars together. Since they could never remember where they parked, they would sit around until all the cars were gone and they could spot their vehicles. One girl says, "We need to find a faster way to get home." The next day, they come to work on a donkey. After work, they come out and see a donkey tied to the fence. "I think we're going to have to wait again," says the one girl. "I'm not convinced that's our donkey." "Why not?" asks the second girl. The first girl says, "Well, this donkey only has one and this morning when we rode in, I distinctly overheard someone say, 'Hey, look at those 2 on that donkey.'" Little Johnny was sitting in class doing math problems when his teacher picked him to answer a question. "Johnny, if there were 5 birds sitting on a fence and you shot one with your gun, how many would be left?" "None," replied Johnny, "because the rest would fly away." "Well, the answer is 4, said the teacher, "but I like the way you're thinking." Little Johnny says, "I have a question for you. If there were 3 women eating ice cream cones in a shop, one was licking her cone, the second was biting her cone, and the third was sucking her cone, which one is married?" "Well," said the teacher nervously, nervously. I guess the one sucking the cone. No, said little Johnny, the one with the wedding ring on her finger, but I like the way you're thinking. A mathematician leaves a conference, only to find that the last train is gone. Being a devout Christian, he falls to his knees and prays, God, if it lies within your will, please send me a way to get home tonight. To his astonishment, there is a swirl of ethereal music, and an angel descends from the clouds. And moments later, a shiny black Audi appears, where it wasn't before. Hail, thou who has found favor with the Lord, proclaims the angel. Here is your way home! And the angel hands him the keys to the Audi. An hour or so later, the mathematician is parking outside his house, and he once again kneels and prays, Lord, who has heard my prayer and been gracious unto me, I now ask that you take back this gift. I only wanted to get home, and you have done all that I could have asked. So let me not be tempted by the desire for material gains. There is another swirl of ethereal music, and a still more glorious creature appears. The mathematician bows reverently and says, Have I the honor of addressing Michael, or are you Gabriel? Why do you ask? Says the radiant figure. Because, says the mathematician, if you are here to undo the function of an angel, you must be an archangel. John was driving when a policeman pulled him over. He rolled down his window and said to the officer, Is there a problem, officer? No problem at all. I just observed your safe driving and am pleased to award you a $5,000 safe driver award. Congratulations. What do you think you're going to do with the money? John thought for a minute and said, Well, I guess I'll go get that driver's license. Judy, sitting in the passenger seat, said to the policeman, Oh, don't pay attention to him. He's just a wise guy when he's drunk and stoned. Brian from the back seat said, I told you guys we wouldn't get far in a stolen car. And at that moment, there was a knock from the trunk and a muffled voice said, Are we over the border yet? The two newborn babies are in the maternity ward. One asks the other, Hey, are you a boy or a girl? I'm a boy, replies the other one. How do you know? I'll show you after the nurse has gone out. Okay. The nurse finishes up with the rest of the kids and leaves. So, goes the first baby. How do you know? Look here, says the second baby, while throwing his blanket off of himself and says, See, I've got blue socks.